Well, a week and a half from today, we start our annual missions conference. The theme this year is designed around the idea of holding the rope. As a church, we hold the rope for many missionaries all throughout this world. And Pastor Bill asked me to take some time this morning and a little bit of time next Sunday morning to talk about missions and make sure that we refresh our memories with this whole idea of what it means to be a missionary on deputation, why we use Faith Promise as a means of helping to support our missionaries. So this morning I'm going to focus on this idea of missionaries that come through our church, whether the one that we typically have every month or the several that we have during our missions conference, and talk about this idea of deputation and what they're trying to accomplish and how us knowing a little bit more about that can help us better pray, better encourage, and engage in the lives of those missionaries that are going to be with us here in a week and a half. And by the way, as a reminder, this week on our church's social media, I'll be introducing all of you to the missionary guests that will be here through our conference. And then on Wednesday, if you come, the prayer sheet will have some more detail about each of those family as well. So whether you get a hard copy of that or see that online, that'll help you to be familiar with who's going to be here and begin praying for those specific individuals and their families as well. But when a missionary typically comes to our church, they're on this thing called deputation. You may or may not know what that means. Occasionally we have a missionary come back that we already support, and that term that we use is furlough. They're coming off the field, reporting to all of their supporters about how things are going with their ministry. Some cases they're raising additional support to cover funds that maybe were lost during that period of time, or as the ministry grows, they may need additional funding for that. But a missionary typically within independent Baptist circles are going, when God calls them to the mission field and has laid a certain area on their heart, they set out to be faithful to that call and to gather support, financial support, prayer support, friend support, all the things that are necessary for them to operate on that mission field. And so when they go to the mission field, they have to raise funds to do and manage the household just like each and every one of us do here. They've got to pay rent, they've got to pay utilities, they've got to buy food, they have to buy insurances, they have to educate their children, they have to save for retirement, they have to have health care, all that sort of stuff. So part of what they're doing on deputation is raising funds for them to live on a foreign field, and domestic field in some cases, but many cases a foreign field. And in most countries, you're prohibited by law if you're not a citizen of that country to earn income in that country. So they can't go and get a job there and support themselves. As churches, we help hold the rope by supporting them financially. But not only are they raising funds for their own personal household expenses, they're raising funds for the ministry that they're doing there as well. Most missionaries going to the field, they've not started their church yet. They've not started their ministry. So they're going to go there, they're going to preach the gospel, they're going to gather believers, they're going to plant a church and help disciple the individuals in that church, teach them to give, teach them to support their own ministry. But in the meantime, they've got to rent a building, they've got to get sound systems, chairs, pews, instruments, literature, Bibles, insurances, all the things as you look around our building and maybe think of some of the things that you interacted with this morning. None of that exists where they're going, so they've got to gather all those things. So not only do they have their personal expenses, but they're raising, in essence, like a mini church budget as part of their deputation amount. So when I share an amount with you, and I'm going to use some actual numbers to try and help us understand, put this in perspective. I'm going to say if a missionary is raising $5,000 a month to go to the mission field, don't allow yourself to just do the math and say, okay, times 12, that's $60,000 a year. That's a pretty good living for that missionary family. Well, again, cost of living, exchange, all those things need to be factored into that, but it's not just their personal living expenses. They're also raising funds to carry out the ministry, and that can be very costly. In fact, at times it can be more than 50% of what the overall support need is. So let's just use that $5,000 because that is fairly indicative. Some missionaries today need more than that, and I would say probably most need more than need less than that. But let's say if they needed $5,000 a month and churches supported them at $100 a month, you're going to see who's awake, whose brain's working at this point. How many churches would they need supporting them on a regular basis to raise that $5,000 a month? 50. All right, a few of you are awake. That's good. So at $100 a month, they would need 50 churches. Now, I would say our church supports missionaries typically at $100 a month. Sometimes more, rarely less than that. But I would say the average probably is less than that. I still process all the HBM support and our brother Randy and Kelly's support, and typically it's less than that. But the numbers are easier to wrap our minds around when I use that. So they need 50 churches, or they need 50 churches at $100 a month. So they're going to start calling churches to try and raise that support. And typically, things change and the processes evolve, but my experience, having gone through this myself years ago, was that it typically takes about 40 phone calls to schedule one meeting. And so if that, and I guess another stat that would be key here is it typically takes presenting your ministry in 3 churches before one of them would take you on for support. Now again, as the Lord leads, that could always be different. So if they needed 50 churches and 1 out of 3 takes them on, it means they need 150 meetings, right? And so if it takes 40 phone calls for a meeting, 150 times 40 is about 6,000 phone calls. It takes that missionary to call church after church after church. Someone finally schedules them, and they go in and present their work and so forth. So it gives you an idea of the magnitude of what it takes to accomplish this. And as I've shared these in the past, my question is, do you ever see any opportunities there for discouragement, wanting to maybe give up? And if the idea of sticking your family in a car and traveling from church to church to church on a week in and week out basis sounds exciting, well, there probably is some excitement about that. And you see a lot of places, make a lot of great memories, but can I tell you that excitement pretty quickly wears off? I mean, if you think, how long does this process take? Well, if you needed to have 50 supporting churches, you need 150 meetings. If you had a church meeting every Sunday morning, every Sunday evening, every Wednesday, you could do 150 meetings in a year. That would mean every single service you were somewhere different at a different church. Now, typically, I don't know anyone who's ever been able to accomplish that objective because pastors like to preach on Sunday morning to their people. There's missions conferences like ours that last 5 days. And so there are many other challenges that go into that. But it takes typically 2 to 3 years to raise that support. And it's valuable time because God is teaching them lessons along the way, needed lessons that they need for the mission field. Not giving up, being steadfast, learning to trust the Lord by faith, meet new people. I mean, just so many different things God is teaching through that process. But many missionaries don't make it through deputation for various reasons. Overlay COVID onto the situation like what we've dealt with this year. Very challenging. Many missionaries, if not all missionaries on deputation, probably lost a significant amount of meetings or didn't get new meetings because of the uncertainty of that. Fortunately, our church, every missionary that we had scheduled this year came and presented their ministry this year. Part of that time was when the church was not meeting, so they came and preached to an empty auditorium, and you got to know them by watching them online, so praise the Lord for that. We doubled love offerings during that time as well because we realized that many missionaries had lost meetings and lost love offering support, so we tried to help hold the rope there. But I say all that to say this and help you understand a little bit about that is when missionaries come to our church in a week and a half, and those that come throughout the remainder of this year and next year, do everything you can to be an encouragement to them. The road is long and it's difficult and it's challenging. It's tough to raise your kids from the car. It's tough to be in a different home or hotel, week after week after week, and it's just very stressful. And God has purposes and why it's difficult, but just take it upon yourselves to be the one that will encourage them. Chris and I did this many times, and what we learned is just took one person in one church to come up and say, hey, I'm so glad you're here. I appreciate what you're doing. Keep following God's call. Don't get discouraged. Don't let the enemy bring you down. When problems happen, just keep focused, keep moving forward. If everyone in our church committed to do that with every missionary family this week, I guarantee you they would leave Columbia Road Baptist Church excited, ready, full of energy and vigor to go out to the next church and the next and the next and the next. So my challenge remains, be the one. Individually choose, be the one. Go up to them, engage them, ask them about their ministry, tell them what's the most exciting thing that's happened to you on deputation, what's the most embarrassing thing, what has God taught you, what are you most excited about, how can I pray for you today, tomorrow, next week. Just engage them and let them know you care about them, you're interested, and that you will pray for them. And we'll do a great work to hold the rope for those missionaries who are going to be here this coming week. So again, thank you. We'll talk next week about Faith Promise Missions, how we support missionaries as a church, and why we do it that way and what that means to us. So again, thank you, brother.